Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So, we're going to talk about a New York Times article titled, "No One Believes Me: How Rape Cases Get Dropped." Now, yes, this mostly, and I bring in some national stuff from time to time on the show. This talks about what's going on in New York. It translates very easily to what's going on in Chicago, but also around the country. This is a very, very sensitive, but yet very, very, very important topic, right? And it gets very little play from the media, very little coverage. We may have a report on that soon, actually, but very little coverage. And so I think it's very important. We know, just to give you a little hint about how this is done in Chicago, we did a study, such as it was, on case statuses for, just in aggregated numbers from Chicago, from 911, Chicago Police Department, and the prosecutor's office. And we FOIA'd aggregate data. And the police department, almost all the cases were closed. Or they weren't closed. What was the status? They were suspended. I'm sorry, that's it. Suspended, waiting on new information. And it turns out they hardly ever charge or seek charges out, and the prosecutors hardly ever charge acquaintance cases. Almost never. It's very murky about what goes on in these cases. We tried, under Anita Alvarez and Rahm Emanuel and Gary McCarthy, we tried with the Rahm's office and Preckwinkle's offices as co-chairs of the task force to study 5 years of sexual assault case processing data, from 911 call through adjudication or disposition of the case or termination of the case. We had like 25 violence against women organizations, community organizations, business leaders, policymakers, Scott Wagaspak, Jesus Garcia, who then was a county commissioner, and Barbara Flynn Curry, who was a state rep and was in Mike Madigan's, leadership office. They were all in the task force. And we couldn't get the CPD and the state's attorney under Anita Alvarez. Jen Green now works at Lifespan. She killed that. Her and the police department got together and decided if neither one of them gave data to us for this task force, they couldn't do it. And they just stalled it out. That's how frightened they are about what's getting people to peek under the covers, about what under the hood, basically, of what's going on there. They don't want it to happen. It's very murky. It's a crime that affects huge numbers of 50% plus of the population. It's something that's not talked about anywhere enough. So we're going to go into this article. Okay, from the New York Times. The police investigation lasted months, but when the case reached the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Cy Vance, who basically dropped charges originally against Harvey Weinstein and then cut a sweetheart deal, I think it's later on in this, you're going to be shocked, but okay. Manhattan District Attorney's Office prosecutors quickly declined to bring charges, records show. It would be 7 more months before, I'm not going to say her name, the victim or the survivor got an explanation. That's right. Drop charges, don't tell the survivor. The reason they don't want to tell them is because they don't want the survivor going to the media, and also they don't want to have to tell. They don't want to have to articulate why they're not prosecuting. Because a lot of the times, as research has shown, it's a lot of non or extra legal or non-legal factors. How were you dressed? How did you act? Were you drinking? Did you smoke marijuana or do some other drug? Because if you did any of that, that of course means you called, you were looking to get assaulted. There's a question that underlies all of this, which is, what is the prosecutor's responsibility when it comes to sexual assault cases? Is it to only prosecute cases they're pretty darn sure they can get a conviction in? Or should they prosecute cases where they have absolute faith in the credibility of the survivor, they have absolute faith that the incident happened, and it's less than certain they will get a conviction? and sometimes significantly less than certain, they will get a conviction. What should they do? In Cook County, at least previous to Fox, but maybe even with Fox, the cops have to go seek felony review. So they got to get permission to file felony charges for rape charges or sexual assault charges, aggravated criminal sexual assault in Illinois. They got to get permission. So in the cases that get denied, and a lot of them get denied, often the cops would, because the cops can press misdemeanor charges directly. They don't have to get permission. So they would file misdemeanor charges. And then they'd go to court, and it would be a trial on the misdemeanor charges, even though what the victim is describing, the harm that was brought to her, the actions of the defendant were felony. Everyone knows what's going on there. For some reason, the misdemeanor prosecutor believed her, but felony review didn't. Or they didn't think they could win, but misdemeanor thought they could win. It's kind of strange. So what is the prosecutor's responsibility? It's really an interesting conversation. I don't think that's one we nearly have enough. I know the violence against women organizations try to push it, that conversation, but it does not get into the media where it deserves to be, so that there could be a more robust public conversation about this. Let's go back to the article. Most New York City prosecutors' offices rejected a greater percentage of sex crime cases in 2019, the last year for which there was reliable data is available, than they did roughly a decade earlier before the case against Harvey Weinstein touched off on national reckoning. Some civil rights lawyers or defense attorneys like, that's great. We need more cases out of the system. I'm not 100% sure that's the right thing. I don't want anyone going to, I believe in let one guilty man go free rather than, or let 10 guilty men go free rather than wrongly imprison someone who didn't do anything. And I'm not sure imprisoning someone at all for most things makes sense. But it's complicated, especially when you're still talking about a vast majority of male workforce in policing, and the vast majority of survivors being female. And I think there is some research to show that having women cops has not changed that percentage. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think they're, on the whole, found to be that much more sympathetic to female survivors than male cops are. Once again, yes, diversity for yes. I mean, if a male can treat a victim horribly or survivor horribly, then a female should be able to do that job. But when you're asking, like, we need diversity to impact how survivors get treated, it looks like diversity may not be the difference we all think it to be, which is what we learned 20, 30 years ago when we tried to diversify by race for the police officers. So let's get back to Mr. Vance, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, who is in the process of actually retiring. He will not run for re-election. And it's soon, actually. It's within the next 6 months. I think it may be November, actually, that his election is, but it is soon. All right, back to the article. Mr. Vance, who heads one of the largest and most prominent district attorney's offices in the country, has faced harsh criticism over his office handling of sex crimes, including the 2015 investigation of Mr. Weinstein. The former Hollywood producer was convicted last year of rape and sexual assault, and the no jail plea deal in 2016 for a Columbia University gynecologist accused of molesting dozens of patients. I'm going to guess that gynecologist was white. I'm just taking a guess. I have no idea. Let's continue. Though the number of rape reports made to the police jumped around 20% after Master Weinstein's behavior was exposed, it is difficult to determine how strong or weak those additional cases were. The number of cases closed by Manhattan prosecutors by winning convictions, dropping the cases, or securing pleas or lesser charges has not deviated much each year from the average over the past decade. So more survivors came forward, and we know there's a lot. If you look at the National Crime Victimization Study 10, 15 years ago, it was believed that 1 out of every 10 cases, 10 assaults, got reported to the police. So there was a lot of cases that could come forward from the police, right? That weren't. But the rate at which they approved cases didn't change. Because you know why? The elements needed for them to prosecute, the level hadn't changed. Even though they screwed up Weinstein, they gave this Columbia gynecologist the deal of a lifetime, it seems. What did they learn? What changed? Nothing, it seems. Nothing. Now, yes, we don't know. Maybe, it doesn't seem like it, but maybe only survivors came forward that didn't have strong cases, or they were all lying. I don't know. I doubt it. Data doesn't seem to support that. Now, for me, I think prosecutors and cops and prosecutors, if a cop decides to not pursue charges in a case, they should have to explain why in written. In write. Available to the survivor or the victim of the crime, and publicly available, or a written version that was publicly available. So we could track their reasons. Right. Okay, let's continue. The experience of women like her name, I'm not going to read her name, even though it's the New York Times, there's no reason for me to do it. The experiences of women like her raise questions of prosecutors like Mr. Bragg and lawmakers who have been reconsidering New York's rape laws. How should prosecutors approach cases where victims' accounts are credible but may be difficult to prove in court? Should the state's laws make conviction in such cases easier to win? And how should the criminal justice system balance the rights of the accused and a modern understanding of sexual violence? That last paragraph is vital, but we're not having that conversation. I'm not so sure you even have to go to the point of where you're making convictions easier to get. That scares me and seems to be a slippery slope that we don't want to go down. I know too many people have gotten off. I've met people who have gotten off of Illinois' death row. So I'm not sure we need that. However, what is the job of the prosecutor? Is it their responsibility to prosecute cases that need to be prosecuted, regardless of their likelihood of winning? Or is it their job only to take cases they're really likely to win? That's a very serious question, and a discussion that needs to be had. And because for the most part our media is so shallow, it's not a conversation we're going to have.